Hi, Amy.
My question is about space and time. So you've talked about the mind being in a finite space-time place, continuum, and which I understand, but I had an experience in my wood shop, and I was cutting a dovetail joint, and I started the joint, and 2 hours later it was done, and I was not present for it. I have no memory of it, and I don't understand how that can be. What part of my mind knew how to do this without space and time being part of that experience?
When our minds are normally jumping from one object to another. So now, for instance, we might be for a few minutes paying attention to the conversation, then thinking about our performance in the celebration evening, and then thinking about remembering to check in this evening before we fly tomorrow, then thinking about arrangements. And our minds in this way will move from our current experience forward in time through a series of anticipated experiences and the same going backwards through our memories. And this is how our minds work most of the day long, jumping from one object to another. Yeah? And very few of the objects on which our mind is focused are the current experience. Most of the time we have a certain amount of attention on this current experience, but then we're off thinking about this evening or tomorrow or next summer or last year or whatever. And with these thoughts, we imagine this distance of time between now and dinner this evening, between now and our flight home tomorrow. And so we create time in this way by imagining these future events which punctuate the line of time. But there are certain types of activities that require very focused attention, like cutting a dovetail joint or performing a piece of music or performing a sport at a very high level. There are some activities that require a one-pointedness of the mind. And in these activities, the mind is not jumping from one thing to another, from the present object to dinner this evening, to our flight home tomorrow, to our memory of our summer holiday last year. It's staying focused on the object. And because it is staying focused on the object, it is not imagining a duration of time between now and dinner and our flight home and next week. So the fact that you were cutting it's interesting, you didn't say this, that this happened to you when you were cooking Rick's dinner, because you've done that thousands of times and it doesn't require all of your attention. You can cook dinner for your family and also be wondering about the flight, etc. But there are certain jobs that you do, cutting a dovetail, that requires all of your concentration. You need to bring the mind to focus on it, and therefore your mind is not moving from object to object. In other words, in your experience, there is no time. Time is the imagined distance between two events. The distance between this event and dinner this evening is measured in what we call time. The distance between dinner this evening and our flight home tomorrow is a length of time. So normally we're thinking of these different objects and measuring the distance between them, between the current event and the imagined event, or between a remembered event and the current event. We measure that distance as time. But when your focus is one-pointed on an object, which in this case your attention was focused, there was no time in your experience because the mind was not moving from object to object. Time is always the distance between two events. Space is the distance between two objects. But in this case, there was one event and one object. You need two objects, two events to have time. Time is always the duration between two events. Space is always the distance between two objects. But in your experience, there was only one event, cutting the dovetail, and one object, the piece of wood. So there was no room for time or space to develop. So you feel that this event took place in eternity. You feel that it took no time. Another example of this, we say, when we're happy, we say, time flies. Why? What we really mean when we say time flies is there's no time. Time seems to vanish. It's not that. Why? Because when we're unhappy, when we don't like the present moment, our mind is always going into the past or the future. In other words, it's going from object to object. But when we are happy, we are by definition in the moment, because we're happy precisely because we are enjoying the moment. There's no need to leave the moment because we're enjoying the moment. So in the experience of happiness, the mind stays put. There's no motive. The only reason the only motive for the mind leaving the now is to find happiness. But if we are happy in the moment, there's no reason for the mind to leave the now. And that is why when we are happy, time flies or time disappears. We can experience a length of time. Our watch tells us that 4 hours have passed, but to us there was no time present there because we were in the moment.
Oh, that's so interesting. I want to follow up on my experience of it afterward and see what you have to say about it, because I felt like I missed out on something. This is my favorite part of woodworking, is being right in with the wood and watching it disappear from the chisel.
You didn't miss out on it, but because your mind was so focused, because all of your attention was gathered together on a single point, there was no room in that experience for you to separate yourself out as a separate knower of the experience. There was not room in the experience for two, for myself and the object. The 100% of your attention was required for the work. There was no room for you to say, I am loving this, I am enjoying this. In true enjoyment, in true love, there is no self that either enjoys or loves. It is just the moment, and you cannot describe that moment, because any description would be a description of an object from the point of view of a subject. But in your experience, these two had collapsed. So you say, I have no memory of it. It's not that you have no memory of it, it's that the mind has no access to that experience, because it didn't take place in the mind. So it's not that you didn't experience it, it's that you have no memory of it, in the same way that you experience deep sleep, but you have no memory of it.
Got it. That's really cool. Thank you.
And this, it's very interesting, your observation. It's for exactly the same reason that that people practice, for instance, extreme sports. When you are bungee jumping, and you are falling at I don't know what speed, in free fall, headlong, for the rocks below you. Are you wondering what you're going to have for dinner?
No.
Or thinking about checking in this evening when you get home? No. Why not? Because the intensity of the situation has gathered the entire focus of your whole being on a single point. And therefore there is no room for thought. There is no room, therefore, to imagine a distance between yourself and the experience. There is no room for duality, and there is no time in that experience. That's the experience that people love, because in that experience they disappear as a separate self, a separate subject of experience that can say that is a piece of woodwork, or due to the intensity of the focus of intention. They vanish as a separate self. And this single point, without any distraction towards another event or another object, means that time and space disappear. In other words, it's an artificial way of inducing a taste of the bliss of one's true nature. It's what Jean Klein referred to as the agricultural method. It's a little crude. You can get the same experience by simply sitting in your deck chair on the porch and asking yourself the question, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? But that is why, and ultimately, it's why people love sports as well. Because if you're playing sport at any kind of high level, tremendous, it's so fast. We were talking at breakfast this morning about baseball, cricket, tennis, these sports where the ball is moving so quickly that you have to be exclusively focused on the ball. There's no room for anything else. There's no room for you to separate yourself out from experience. Top athletes report being in the zone. There's no time to think or work that. So at the height of one's performance, one is in eternity. You have no sense of yourself as a separate self. You vanish as a separate self. Time and space disappears. There's just the dimensionless moment, timeless, spaceless, and that is a taste of the bliss of one's true self. And this is why people love sports. It's not just to win. Yes, when that impulse to taste the bliss that is inherent in ourself is translated through the conventions of the mind says, oh, I play sports because I want to win. No, it's not because we want to win that we love these kind of activities. It's because we love the taste of our own being, the happiness that is innate there.